1. This happened a few years ago, so some of my memory might be a little hazy, but this is about the gist of it. Background. I was in the army at the time, serving as a mechanic in Fort Hood, the great place. This story isn't about me per se, but the leadership I worked with at the time. I pretty much witnessed the whole thing, and it's become one of my favorite memories while serving. Characters: Motor Sergeant, Sarge; Motor Chief, Chief; the driver and ground guide, otherwise known as the poor mechanics. For clarification, Chief is in charge of everyone at the motor pool. Sarge is kinda like a second in command. Essentially, they both outrank all the mechanics in the motor pool. So if either of them say you need to do something, you do it. It's not worth fighting back sometimes. On to story. So this occurred around late fall a few years ago. Me and some of the other mechanics were finishing up and trying to find a stopping point so we could clean up and go home on time. Doesn't always happen, but hey, we try. Cue me going into our office to help sweep, get everything organized and whatnot. When I overhear Sergeant Chief going at it, I didn't bother to remember the whole conversation, mainly because it was 1, above my pay grade, and 2, was more worried about food. 3, I didn't really think it would affect us. Oh boy, was I wrong. Later on, one of the poor mechanics told me that Chief was trying to get a Humvee, small truck, that was way overdue on his service, and he was trying to figure out what vehicle he could get out of the bays so he can bring the Humvee in. Unfortunately, almost every truck was on jack stands and had no tires on. Most vehicles were in for services, others had faults that were a priority, cracked windshields, oil leaks, etc. So he targeted the one truck that was an LMTV, a bigger truck that wasn't in for service and wasn't on jack stands. Apparently, after a heated argument between Chief and Sarge over the fact that the LMTV was not safe to take out yet, Chief basically pulled rank and said no one would be going home until the LMTV was out of the bay and the Humvee was in the bay. Suffice to say, Sarge was mad, and all the mechanics were mad, but we really couldn't do anything to defy Chief. It is important to note that our motor pool, the bays in particular, rests on a small hill, and the side of that hill that the LMTV was on goes down towards some grass, fence and barbed wires, and some connexes, also known as shipping containers. But we all just call them connexes because it's easier to say. So cue the malicious compliance. Sarge was ordered by Chief to get the LMTV out of the way. So that's what he was gonna do. He grabbed 2 poor mechanics, one as the driver and the other as the ground guide. While the ground guide was opening the bay door, the driver was trying to start the truck, only for it to start, then die a few seconds later. The LMTV wouldn't stay on for more than 4 or 5 seconds. The driver quickly informed the Sarge, who was watching the whole time. "I know," was all Sarge replied. Basically, he just told the poor mechanics to send it. So they did. The driver started the truck and, with the help of the ground guide, began to drive forward, only for it to die yet again. The front half of the LMTV had barely made it out of the bay. At this point, the second problem had arisen. The brakes didn't work well. So instead of it coming to a complete stop, the truck was very slowly going down the hill. The driver was trying to make a hard left, but couldn't go any further left, and was slowly going towards the corner of the Connex. Ground guide and driver again shouted that the truck wasn't working and now the brakes are giving issues. Big Sarge said nothing and just watched. Then, after what seemed like forever, the LMTV finally made contact with the Connex, creating a small dent in the Connex and a slightly bigger one on the LMTV. No one was hurt. After the collision, the driver tried to start the truck again, but now the truck wouldn't start at all. Furthermore, the path toward the bay had been almost completely blocked off, so no vehicles would be entering that way. Big Sarge simply did a small nod, told the poor mechanics to stand by, and went back inside. From what I heard later on, Chief was pissed. He tried to tear Sarge a new one for allowing this to happen, when Sarge reminded him that he had told Chief repeatedly that the LMTV was in there for those reasons, and that he had informed Chief multiple times that something like this was going to happen or worse. He had also reminded him twice that the Humvee, literally right across from the LMTV, was on jacks, but service had not started. so they could simply put the tires back on, drive it out, and bring in the Humvee that was overdue. But Chief was so determined to take the truck that wasn't on stands yet because it seemed easier. He then finished with, "I was just following your orders, Chief." Chief had to give in and ask Sarge that the Humvee that was across from the LMTV in the bay be taken off jacks and taken out the bay, so they can bring a wrecker, an even bigger truck, to try and bring in the now dented LMTV. Sarge kept the 2 poor mechanics, grabbed 3 more, and sent the rest of us home. I'm told they spent a good 2 or 3 hours to bring everything back to normal. Chief never harassed or pulled his rank on Motor Sergeant from that point on. 2. So it was my junior year of high school, and that meant I had to go through Britlit. I say it that way not because Britlit is inherently bad in any way, but because the teacher was the infamous Mrs. She-Devil. For context, I went to a private Catholic high school, where teachers had the liberty of working religious lessons into their curriculum as they saw fit. And Mrs. She-Devil was notorious for tenuously tying charged rants about Christian morality into every unit. Fast forward about half the year and we were on our unit about Macbeth. Oh crap, I said it. Oh well. Our assignment was to write journal entries based on daily prompts that related to both of our lives and the lives of the characters in Macbeth. We hit a point in the story where one character, I don't remember the story clearly, goes on a furious rampage. The prompt for that day was to write about a situation in our own life where something has driven us to the point of fury. I was kind of stumped on what to write about since I'm a fairly mild individual. That is until she started her lecture. She begins to teach about the immorality of homosexuality. She's obviously never tried it, and about how it is a cardinal sin, and how at best it is God testing an individual to make lifestyle changes to be right in his eyes. I was already pretty heated about this 20-minute-long lecture when someone raised their hand and asked, "What if you have a child that is gay? What should you do?" And Mrs. She-Devil replies, "Well, what would you do if your child was running out into a busy street? You would try to stop them, right?" And the image of her smug-ass face as she believed she had perfectly answered the question in metaphor is still burned into my memory to this day. I was absolutely livid, and through my rage I mustered a small smirk because I realized that this was perfect. As soon as that class was over, I went to work on my journal entry about a time where I was driven to the point of fury. Namely, 5 minutes ago when I had to listen to a lecture on how someone born with a different romantic disposition was a grievous sinner and they were doomed to hell unless they chose to do the righteous thing and change themselves at the core. I wrote every horrible curse I had thought about during that lecture, and a full page of venom culminated in saying, "So fuck you, Mrs. She-Devil, and fuck your decrepit belief system." I let it sit in my journal for 3 weeks while the rest of the prompts filled up my notebook. And before I turned it in, I had the opportunity to think on whether I really wanted to give a note full of curses and insults directly to the teacher it was aimed at. Then I remembered that she had literally asked for it, so I turned it in. The next day I was greeted and sent directly to the dean's office, where there was a photocopy of my journal entry with every curse and insult highlighted and circled sitting on his desk. He asked me what I was thinking, and I replied that I was just following the prompt. He told me I absolutely could not show that kind of disrespect to a teacher, and I said that I was only following her example. He said that I could have worded it better, and I said that I was just trying to properly convey the amount of emotion I had towards the topic. He got fed up and quickly told me I was to write an apology letter to the teacher, and that I would serve Saturday detentions until he told me to stop coming. My apology letter went something like, "I'm sorry your lecture was so rage-inducing," and I served about 7 weeks of Saturday detention. But the story doesn't end there. My grades began to decline in that class, even though the quality of my work hadn't changed, and I spent my Saturday mornings in empty classrooms compiling a case to prove she was retaliating against me for my journal entry. My grade had slipped from a high B to a middle C by the end of my sentence, and I had a stack of papers that proved my work hadn't degraded, and I even had some assignments for my sympathizers that showed they were receiving better grades for equal or lesser quality work. So I brought these to my parents, who promptly made a shitstorm about it to the administration and on social media. The school almost immediately transferred me to a senior level course to finish my English credit fairly, and to avoid more controversy. But as soon as other students caught wind that I got out of She-Devil's class, they wanted out too. And once my story had become widespread, the parents of other students were afraid that their kids' grades may be being affected by her biases. By the end of that year, one other student had transferred to the senior level course with me. By the end of the next year, multiple students had been transferred out of Mrs. D's class, and by the end of my younger sister's high school education, the school had constructed a path for students to avoid taking her class entirely. Why she was never fired is beyond me, but I believe I can truly say that because of my experience. The school's entire English department had to be modded to work around Mrs. She-Devil's ridiculous disdain for anyone who disagreed with her delusional beliefs. 3. A while back, I worked at a fantastic Midwestern gas station in the town that I live in. They were pretty short-staffed when I applied, and I was kind of desperate for a job, so I was really excited when I joined, even part-time. I learned the ropes pretty quickly, and there really wasn't too much that differed from previous jobs I've held. My boss, Helga, constantly complimented me on how well I was doing so quickly. It made me feel great. Soon after this, an opportunity for a full-time position became available. Overnight's not ideal, but full-time. I quickly accepted and began the training immediately. I was trained partly by the assistant manager, Brad. Brad had been at the store for a few years and showed me a few tips and tricks to make the nightly routine go by much quicker. The routine was pretty much the same every night. General cleaning of store, deep cleaning of food and drink makers, restocking and making breakfast in the morning hours. The only difference came on the delivery nights, which were twice a week. Now on the overnights, usually only one person is on. On delivery nights, however, a second worker would come in partway through the shift to specifically help with putting the items away, so that the other work could still be done in a timely manner. Brad was usually that guy. The first few weeks went smooth as butter. One delivery night, however, Brad was sick and no one could cover for him. Not a problem, I thought. I could just do as much of the delivery as possible while still managing to get my other duties done. I managed to get through a good 85% of it, mostly the cold goods and things that needed to be put in the refrigerator and freezer. The remaining items were placed neatly at the end of the food island and out of the way of any customers. I finished my morning duties and waited for my relief. I felt good about what I had done and figured Helga would see my effort and feel the same way. No, I was wrong. Immediately upon entering the store, Helga saw the items still sitting on the floor at the end of the island. She didn't initially say anything, so I didn't think much of it. I waited the last few minutes to clock out and went over to the computer to do so. As I'm about to leave, Helga stops me and pulls me aside. She asks me why hadn't the delivery been put away as usual. I explained to her that Brad had not been in the night before to assist me with the delivery, and that I still wanted to be able to finish my other nightly duties. So I did what I thought was necessary, and then I moved on. I explained to her that if I hadn't stopped when I did that morning, food would not have been prepared, and the next shift would be slammed making food trying to get out the basic stuff, along with special orders that inevitably came in every morning. She looked at me for a moment before going on a tangent about how
delivery is the most important thing to worry about,
and how I was wrong for doing what I did. I was taken aback because I really thought I had done right, but apparently not.
She concluded with, "Next time, finish putting the delivery away before anything else."
Cue malicious compliance. I had to wait about a month or so before I could actually act on this, unfortunately. My boss felt it unnecessary to have a second person helping on deliveries anymore. I could not give you the slightest reason as to why, but my time had come. On a nice Tuesday night, the delivery arrived approximately 2 hours late. I completed my other duties that would be done prior to delivery. After it was unloaded from the truck, I immediately began working on putting it all away. Backstory to this specific delivery: We had some electrical issues prior which ruined some product and some back ordering as well. Which, to those who don't know, that means that some items weren't able to come on the previous truck due to stock issues in the warehouses. So this delivery was huge. Like almost twice as many boxes as a usual delivery. But this is priority, so I focused on it. It was about 20 minutes or so before the shift exchange when I finally got finished putting the stuff away, approximately 6 hours from start. But I got it all put away. I was happy. There was one problem. Breakfast wasn't made and nothing was prepped for the Friday sale we have every Friday for pizza. Usually I would have had 10 or so pizzas prepared for the next shift, so they can just whip them into the oven and start on other things. I also usually had the breakfast area full of fresh sandwiches and whatnot, but not today. Shift change happens and Helga walks in with a smile on her face. She notices that this time there are no boxes on the end of the island and seems ecstatic. Until she walks a little further down the line and notices that there's not food in the warmer. She then goes to the kitchen to look in the fridge and notices there are no pizzas prepared. Her face turned a shade of red I've never seen before, and she immediately returned to the front desk and called me back. I complied and walked to the back with her, knowing full well what was about to come. She exploded at me, asking why there was no food prepared, and that today is a busy day and that she wasn't going to stand for this kind of laziness. I let her finish her rant before I answered, "Well, the delivery was a bit bigger this time because of all the extra stuff, and honestly, I'm surprised I got it done, but I got it done, 'cause that's what you told me to do." I wish Brad would have been here to help. This delivery was huge. I clocked out after a few more minutes of her again telling me I was wrong and all that yada yada. I didn't really care to continue the conversation, and I knew I had made my point. I came back a couple hours later to buy some things for home. The poor kitchen staff were still struggling to get enough food out to satiate the morning crowd. But at least the delivery was put away. 4. This had been an ongoing issue with my job for months. I'm military, but I work in an office primarily with civilians and contractors. We're basically military in name only, but there's a few upper leaders who take it very, very seriously. We work a Panama schedule, 12-hour shifts. Every other week I work 70 hours, which includes every day of a normal weekend. We're severely undermanned, with most of us working 2 positions at once to make up for the gaps. There's never enough people to get all the work done, but we do pretty well and we always knock out the top priorities. I'm a shift supervisor, so my co-workers fall under my purview of responsibility. They're linguists, processing hundreds of audio cuts a day, as do I. I don't know anyone who can sit for 12 hours headphones on, listening to crappy foreign languages. I'm talking about the quality of the audio, not the actual languages themselves when I say crappy. Just to be clear. Who can do so for the full shift with no breaks and still be a good operator giving quality work. I always, especially on weekends when most offices don't have employees in, let my operators take a break to read or watch a couple of YouTube videos or go chat to someone. As long as the work gets done, what do I care? But for the sake of decorum, I limit these breaks to about 15 minutes an hour. Pretty reasonable, right? Apparently not. There's an E7 in charge of my shop, as well as 2 others at any given time. Basically, we just report stats to them and they keep us appraised of goings-on in our mission sets. I had just finished processing about 100 files, and I'd been in for about 2.5 hours without stopping. I ambled over to YouTube and watched a couple of short videos to give myself a break, and over comes the E7 to chastise me for it. They have a particular distaste for YouTube. But basically, having your headphones on for any reason except work-related audio is treated as non-compliance. So I went back and did another 100 cuts, and then read a little from a novel I brought. Same E7, same issue. At this point, I'm tired, and more annoyed than usual. I can't read. I can't listen to audio that isn't someone screaming in a different language. And I can't go anywhere since we're so undermanned. I started setting an alarm for 1/4 till every hour. And for those 15 minutes I would sit and stare at the wall. I wouldn't speak to anyone. I wouldn't watch or read anything. just sit still and idly in my chair. Whoever entered my field of vision received that stare, which of course included the E7, as he is constantly coming to our spaces to make sure we're not smiling, laughing, or breathing. It didn't take long for him to ask me what I was doing, and I told him honestly I was taking a break before diving back into my work. He was generally uncomfortable with the 1,000-yard stare at first, but gradually it turned into irritation, building slowly until he reached the conclusion that I must just be doing this to be disrespectful and petty, which isn't untrue, and he decided to take it to my direct chain of command to report my insubordination. My own E7 calls me in, already pissed off because the previous E7 equated my silent breaks as something akin to a war crime. And they all sort of stick together and believe each other until proven otherwise. I very calmly explained the situation, emphasizing the unreasonable expectation of our work being at its best when we can't step away to breathe for a second in some capacity. And certainly I did not intend to make this E7 feel as though I was intentionally disrespecting him. I was simply following orders of what I and my operators are not allowed to do on breaks. My E7 was mostly on the side of this other E7, so he took it to my E8 and junior officer leadership. The same conversation was repeated, and after providing statistics on the amount of work completed, with and without quality breaks allowed, which I had been collecting since the first incident in case it came to a head. Always have a paper trail, y'all. I essentially proved myself right. Upper leadership hates when that happens. But in the face of factual, tangible evidence that both employees and the quality of work suffer when you don't allow brief respites, we developed a timed, organized break system, 15 minutes max, every hour, to do one non-work-related activity. Suck it, E7. For anyone wondering, we aren't allotted a lunch break. We have to eat at our desks while we work. We are allotted the 15-minute break. We don't always get to take it if the workload is heavy enough. That's typically more true on a weekday than a weekend. 5. So this happened a while ago. When I was in college, I used to work for my local movie theater. The job was amazing most of the time. You had a lot of freedom from the managers if you did your job right. On a busy night, this was the situation. I was working behind the bar. We had a system where we would sell tickets and concessions at the same registers. Most of the time, this would work just fine. But one busy Saturday night, it would take a lot of time to take tickets, orders, discuss seating in the theater, and get all the food and drinks. On this evening, everything was running smoothly. It was a busy night, but the team was well prepared and we had everything under control. I was taking an order from a longtime customer, Linda. Linda was a nice woman, and we always had a nice chat with her. She was 25, had a subscription at our theater. This would mean it would show her picture on the app with her date of birth and a QR code. This way we could see that that person was old enough to see the movie. Linda was ordering some nachos and 2 beers. Now I know that Linda is well above the legal drinking age, in my country 18, and had already scanned her QR code. You would get points for free stuff when you bought drinks and foods. I already knew her age was alright, so no reason to ask for any form of ID. So here I am getting the order ready. When I say the total to Linda, a lady behind her, Karen, for obvious reasons, starts yelling, "You didn't check your ID!" Linda looks over her shoulder, probably wondering why this woman is meddling, and turns back to me. "Do you really need to see my ID? I could grab it if you want to." So I'm here thinking, Karen should STFU and mind her own business. No need to, Linda. I know you're older than 18, and it also says on the app.
"No, you need to check it. You need to check everyone that buys alcohol."
"Miss, I already verified her age and—"
"No! Only a legal ID or passport is good to verify age."
Sure, this is the case in a normal situation, but when a customer has a subscription at our theater, they already have to verify their age and name with a legal ID. So we accept the app as a legal form of verification. At this point, I'm already losing my patience. Why is Karen meddling in this situation when Linda is clearly over the age of 18? Miss, thanks for bringing this to my attention, but this woman is a loyal customer and we already know her age because—
"No! This is unacceptable! You should check her ID!"
I'm really starting to get annoyed, and Linda is noticing as well. Luckily, Linda is a chill woman and smiles at me while grabbing her ID. Here it is. All good, right? Sorry for this, and thanks for showing. It is not necessary, though. No problem at all, and good luck with her, she says while smiling and giving me a wink. I finalize the purchase and get ready to enjoy serving Karen. Karen has a major attitude, and the order takes ages. She doesn't like the seats, and changes them a couple of times. She demands a student discount, which we don't give on Saturdays, and she is clearly older. Finally, she orders her food, and last, but not least, she orders a red wine. This triggers me instantly. I'm standing there with a big smile on my face like a kid in a candy store. You all see where this is going. I grab the wine, put it on the counter, then I say with my most polite voice, "Can I see your ID, miss?"
Excuse me?
Well, miss, as you pointed out to me, I should check everyone for ID.
Well, I'm obviously older than 18.
Sure, Karen wasn't looking anywhere near 18, but she didn't hit prime Karen age either. I would say she was in her early 30s, but with all the plaster on her face, she could pass for a 25-year-old. Or a brick wall. Miss, the woman I asked before you was well over the age of 18. You insisted I follow the rules. If you don't have your ID with you, I can't sell you the alcohol.
Preposterous! I demand to speak to the manager!
Sure, I will get him. Now, the manager this evening was Bob. Bob hated types like Karen, and I knew he would stand by my side. So I grabbed Bob and informed him of the whole situation. When I explained it all, Bob smiled at me with a huge grin on his face.
Let's go have some fun.
So Bob walks with me to the registers, and Karen yelled the whole story. Bob listens carefully, and then reminds her of the rules that she needs to have some ID or she won't get her wine. Karen is done with the situation, I could clearly tell. The preview's already started, so she grabs her wallet and pulls out a public transport card.
Here you go. It states I'm old enough.
Sorry, miss, that isn't a legal form of ID.
Karen at this point is bright red, and I thought she would burst out in anger.
I demand you sell me this wine. This is ridiculous. I am about to miss the movie.
Nothing I can do for you without ID, miss. I should note that when the previews are over, usually after 15 minutes after starting time, we can't let you go inside the theater because this will cause a disturbance for the other visitors.
At this point, I wish I could have taken a picture of Karen's face. The utter face of defeat was amazing to see.
Fine, just keep the wine. I'm going to see the movie and then I'm never coming back here.
That's a shame, miss.
He then tells her total, minus the wine. After the whole incident, I got a compliment from Bob for sticking to the rules and for defeating a Karen at her own game. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 42. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I actually thought I'd done one of these more recently, but I was looking back and I think it's been a couple of weeks at least. So time for another revenge video. Yes, well, as you guys get this, it'll be Sunday. I am still under self-imposed. I will be for another week. After that, I probably won't be leaving the house. Gotta say, my symptoms haven't really gotten that bad, so I think I've just picked up a regular old flu, you know. Sometimes it's bad with me, sometimes it's really not. In this case, no. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. Longest outro I've done, actually. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.